With all the discussion about Nintendo's next-gen system and the Nintendo Switch 2, one topic that I've seen a lot of people talking about is the power of the system and how capable it's actually going to be. And with these next-gen systems already on the market, like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, how is Nintendo's next system going to be able to stand up to them, and what is it going to be like in terms of its actual power? So that's what we're going to be talking about inside of this video, as I'm going to be giving like a detailed comparison of exactly what the power could be like for the Nintendo Switch 2, and how it's going to compare to a lot of other systems that you've already heard about. Now before we get started, there are two disclaimers that I feel like are worth talking about. So the first one is definitely that power isn't everything. Like we're going to see inside of this video, like I'm going to be comparing the power to next generation systems, some other systems that are already out, and presumably what the Nintendo Switch 2 might be having in terms of its power. But I hope that you guys don't get into like that mindset of, oh, this might not be as powerful as we think, or oh, these other systems are way more powerful, or anything like that, because at the end of the day, the power of a system is not the main selling point for how successful a system is going to be or anything like that. In fact, once you guys see how powerful the Nintendo Switch was, you might actually be shocked at how the games even came out on a system like that compared to all of the specs that you're going to see for the other system. But really at the end of the day, it is always going to be the games that are going to be the main driver for the sales of a system. No one goes into a store and says like, oh my god, this console has 8 GB of RAM, I'm totally going to buy it now, that's a day one purchase. It's always going to be the games that are going to be the deciding factor, because at the end of the day, you could have the most powerful video game system of all time and have it be insanely capable with ridiculous performance, but if there's no good games to play on it or nothing interesting, no one's really going to bother with that system. And so the reason why people buy a Nintendo Switch is because that is the only place where you can play games like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, like Super Mario Odyssey, like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, like Fire Emblem Engage. And the reason why people buy a PlayStation is because that is the place where you can play games like God of War and Spider-Man and Final Fantasy. And then the other disclaimer is just about the power of the Nintendo Switch 2, because of course, from the time that I'm making this video, Nintendo hasn't said anything about their next system yet, we have no information on it, and so what I am going to be talking about inside of this video with how powerful the Switch 2 is going to be is actually just based around the estimations that people have done looking at the supposed leak specs that we have for this next system. So if you guys didn't know, a few years ago, Nvidia had a huge server hack that happened and a lot of information got out there, and one of the pieces of information was about their next chip that they were working on for the next Nintendo Switch, and it was from that information that people were able to kind of look at the specs of that system and kind of exactly what it might be like, and then run like simulations and experiments to kind of get an idea and gauge how powerful the system might be. And of course, we also have insiders now who are just tweeting about apparently what Nintendo is working on with their chips and how big the chips are going to be. Like just a few days ago, I made a video about how apparently one of the mobile leakers was talking about how there's apparently going to be Nintendo using like Samsung based 5nm chips. Apparently that was like debunked, but now he's saying he's a little bit unsure about it, so it's still possible. We don't really know for sure, but there's just a lot of stuff that's happening, and so it's really people just taking all of that information that's out there and then running kind of experiments and simulations to kind of get an idea for how powerful the Nintendo Switch 2 might be. So these aren't just random numbers that are pulled out of thin air, they are using information that is already out there. But it's also possible that the Nintendo Switch 2 specs might not be this either, so you shouldn't get yourself super excited too that it's going to be exactly like this, because it's possible that you could be disappointed and it could be less powerful than what I'm going to talk about inside of this video. So at the end of the day, we're never really going to truly know until somebody actually gets the system in their hands, takes it apart, finds the chip, and then is able to kind of reverse engineer and figure out how powerful it is, because Nintendo is also not the type of company to really market like how powerful their systems are. Like they're not going to be advertising that, so we're really just going to have to wait until somebody actually gets their next system and takes it apart and is able to figure that out. But we kind of have estimations right now just going off of what we have in terms of the leaked information, so that's what I'm going to be using inside of this video. Now, when it comes to talking about the power of a video game system, something that you might have heard a few times is the word teraflop, but what exactly does that mean? Well, in order to explain that, let's first break the word into its two parts. So the first part that we have is tera, which is just another way of saying trillion. You probably know the word tera from like terabyte, and that's just another way of giving you kind of like exactly how big something is. So like you have, you know, terabytes, gigabytes, megabytes, kilobytes, basically just like that. Tera just means trillion. Now flops, on the other hand, stands for floating point operations per second. Now that might seem a little bit confusing, but basically just think of it like an operation as like a math equation that's a little bit more complex, because you're probably going to be using like three-dimensional things. So you're going to have like an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis. But just think of it as like a complex math equation, as if you've done anything with like game design or coding or anything like that, then you probably are aware that a lot of it just comes down to using math at the end of the day. There's always so many computations and algorithms and things that are being calculated behind the scenes under the hood to make a game be able to work. So now think of like a really complex game that has a lot of pretty graphics, a lot of particle effects, and you have like the HP of your characters, the damage output, lots of different enemy models on the world. You have a lot of like different models for trees and rocks and stuff like that. Like think of how complex a game like that is, and all of the stuff that you're kind of calculating behind the scenes. And so in very simple terms, a video game system that is 1 teraflop is basically able to do 1 trillion of those complex equations every single second. And of course, the more teraflops that a console has, the more strain that you can put onto the system with the games, like having better graphics, better frame rate, better visuals, better effects, and all of that type of stuff. So now that you have all of that information, what would be your guess for how powerful the current Nintendo Switch that we all have right now is in terms of its teraflops? Do you think it's around 3 teraflops, around 2? Well, the answer to that is actually it's not even 1 teraflop. The Nintendo Switch that we have right now is 0.39 teraflops in its handheld mode. And when you put the Nintendo Switch into its dock, you get a slight performance boost, and then it becomes exactly 0.5 teraflops, or 1/2 of 1 teraflop. So if 1 teraflop can do 1 trillion equations per second, then that means the current Nintendo Switch that we have right now in docked mode can do about 500 billion equations every single second. But now let's take a look at the teraflops for some other video game systems. So the original Xbox One, which came out in 2013, has 1.31 teraflops. The Steam Deck, which came out just last year, has 1.60 teraflops. The original base PlayStation 4 has 1.84 teraflops. Now you might remember that the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One came with mid-generation upgrades, so the PlayStation 4 Pro had 4.2 teraflops, and the Xbox had the upgrade of the Xbox One X, which had 6 teraflops. And finally, moving to the next generation systems which are on the market right now, the PlayStation 5 has 10.28 teraflops, and the most powerful video game system that is on the market right now is the Xbox Series X, which can do 12 teraflops, which would basically mean that it can do 12 trillion different computations every single second. So now with all of this information, how powerful would the next Nintendo Switch be in terms of its teraflops? You could probably guess with the gaps that I left here in the graph. So using all of the simulations from the leaked specs and the information that we have, it's estimated that the Nintendo Switch 2 in handheld mode would be around 2 teraflops, and in docked mode, it would be about 3.4 teraflops. Now from this information, I feel like there's going to be 2 types of people. One group is going to be like, wow, this is actually really impressive. This looks like a substantial upgrade from the original Nintendo Switch that we have right now. And the other group is going to be like, oh my god, it's only going to be 3 teraflops? You're telling me that the Xbox Series X, which came out 4 years ago, is going to be 4 times more powerful than the Switch 2, which is going to be coming out in 2024? This is terrible. How could Nintendo do this? We're screwed. So if you're like the second group, let me explain. The Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be a tablet-like system, just like the original Nintendo Switch, that can be put into a dock to be able to get better performance. The Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, if any of you guys have those right now, you guys know how big those systems are. They're like huge towers that you basically have to put on your table or under your TV or wherever, and that is how those systems are able to reach such high lengths in terms of its performance. That's how you're able to fit so much power inside of those devices, and how you're able to have like huge fans and stuff to be able to cool those systems and have insane levels of performance. The Nintendo Switch is basically impossible to have that type of performance in something as small as a tablet like that, because the technology just doesn't exist like that. So if you were hoping for like a Nintendo Switch or a system to be even more powerful, or at least at the same level as those, it's just not possible. And even if the systems were able to reach that type of performance, they would be extremely expensive, because it would be so expensive to have those small components inside of a small system. At that point, it would be like a $1,300 system or something like that, like how phones are so expensive, so it just wouldn't be worth it. So instead of comparing this to the high-end systems like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, take a look at the other systems that are underneath the Switch 2 if this is really what the performance is supposedly going to be. Do you guys remember when the Steam Deck came out last year and a bunch of people were calling it the Nintendo Switch killer? Obviously, it wasn't actually that because people were still going to buy a Nintendo Switch, as that is the only place where you can still play games like Mario Odyssey and Smash Ultimate and stuff like that. But I definitely do think that the Steam Deck was a response to the Nintendo Switch to really show that it is possible to have more performance in terms of these types of systems that you can play on the go with you and also hook up to a TV. And the reason why I mention that is because if we take a look at those teraflop estimations in docked mode, 3.4 divided by 1.6 is actually above 2, which would mean that the Nintendo Switch 2 in docked mode is 2 times as powerful as the Steam Deck, which would be insane because that's already what people were saying was like an insane kind of leap in performance from the original Nintendo Switch when the Steam Deck came out. So this would be insane. And I feel like it's really when you compare it to stuff like that where you can kind of see how much of an upgrade this Nintendo Switch 2 would actually be if these performance kind of estimations are actually real. If the Nintendo Switch 2 is really going to be about 2 teraflops in handheld mode, then dividing that by 0.5 means that the Switch 2 in handheld mode is going to be about the equivalent of 4 current Nintendo Switches docked in terms of its power and performance, and that is an insane leap to kind of think about. And this would also make it more powerful than a base PlayStation 4. If you ever owned a PS4, think about how big that system was, especially before the slim version and the original one that came out in 2013. That was a big system. Imagine the next Nintendo Switch having more power than that system in like a small little tablet that we currently have in terms of the Nintendo Switch. Like, that's a huge leap in performance. Think about all the ambitious and crazy games that came out on the original PlayStation 4. You had Elden Ring, which came out on the PS4, you had Final Fantasy VII Remake, you have GTA 5, you have God of War, you have Spider-Man, all of these crazy games that had so many insane graphics and lots of crazy performance and all of that happening. The Nintendo Switch 2, if we're going by these estimations for the power, should be able to run all of those types of games flawlessly on that system. And so if we really have this type of performance to expect for the next system, that definitely should mean that a lot of these next generation games that are coming out and like these Resident Evils and Call of Duties and games like that, which are coming out for multiple platforms, should be able to finally get games on the Nintendo version as well and not have to worry about having like the performance get so downscaled and having it be like 13 FPS and having it be like 540p, which that is definitely the thing that I'm the most excited about. And also the Nintendo Switch 2 is rumored to be using DLSS, which is like AI upscaling to be able to take like a 1080p game and then upscale it to 4K to make it look even more sharper and clearer on a 4K TV. So if anything, this could mean that games are going to be looking much better, and especially think about like Nintendo's own first party games, because if there's anyone who can use the Nintendo system the best, it's obviously Nintendo's own developers. So imagine like games like Zelda and Xenoblade and Mario just looking really crispy and really nice, fluid 60 FPS on the next system. It definitely gives me a lot of hope. And so this probably would be a premium system, so I would expect something like this to cost around $400, maybe even $450, but I feel like $450 would be kind of pushing it because for $50 more, at that point you can buy an entire PS5. So I feel like $400 is probably going to be like the sweet spot, $399.99 for how much the system is probably going to be. And of course, remember that these are just estimations. It's possible that the Nintendo Switch 2 could be a little bit lower than this. Maybe it's going to be like 1.85 teraflops, 2.75 in docked mode. We don't know for sure, but I definitely do feel like that this would be the perfect sweet spot for their next system in terms of its performance. Obviously, it's not reaching PS4 Pro or Xbox One X or Xbox Series X or PS5, but I think having it be more powerful than the Steam Deck and the base PS4 and Xbox One is definitely a given. If the next system comes out and it's not even as powerful as like a Steam Deck, I feel like that just would be a very, very bad thing to do. So hopefully Nintendo is aware of that, especially if they do want to have the Nintendo Switch 2 carrying on for like another 6 to 7 years, because after that comes out, we're probably not going to be seeing another Nintendo system until like 2030, 2031. So you definitely want this system to last for a long time. But yeah, even once they reveal the system, until somebody really gets it in their hands and takes it apart and is able to kind of reverse engineer and figure out how powerful the clock speeds and all of that are, we're really not going to know for sure, but I am hoping that it is going to be somewhere around this range. And so yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely be sure to click that like button and also subscribe to the channel as well, as I'm going to be having more videos covering the Nintendo Switch 2 and all of that very soon. Also comment down below and let me know what you guys think about this. Would you be happy if the Switch 2 is going to have about this much performance? Would you be willing to pay $400 for it? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. Go follow me on Twitter at Aero so you can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros and Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.